Hello and welcome to Art for Everybody. My name is Evi Steiner-Böhm. I'm an artist from Germany, and these two little figures here are called Pedro and Rosa, and they sometimes help me in my videos to explain things or even correct me if I'm wrong. This course is a course especially designed for people who may not have painted for many years and no longer or not yet have the basic knowledge that students have who have just left school. In this first lesson, we will look at the absolute necessary material you are going to need. We will do some simple exercises in color mixing and also paint a small still life together. And since this is an ongoing course, I will give you some tasks at the end of these lessons that you can do at home so that you can get the routine you are going to need. Just like all other painting media, oil paints come in different qualities. Studio or studio colors are completely sufficient for beginners. However, they are not as strongly pigmented as the expensive artist's colors and sometimes not quite as bright. But I personally still use the cheaper studio paints, and only for a few exceptions, like for example cadmium yellow or cadmium orange or cadmium red, I buy artist colors. What you should make sure of is that you buy branded goods. Like for example in Germany we have Schminke and Lucas. In England you have Daler and Rowney, Winsor and Newton. Cheap offers from the discounters will inevitably disappoint you and quickly spoil the fun of oil painting for you. So for today I recommend these hues. That's cadmium yellow, cadmium red, ultramarine blue and titanium white. And after you've tried out oil paints for the first time and say, okay, I want to continue working with them, then it's enough if you buy other variations of the basic colors. And I would suggest you buy lemon yellow, crimson or madder, Prussian blue or phthalo blue, and one of the so-called earth colors, which is, for example, burnt sienna. Oil paints, as the name suggests, are made from color powder, which is called pigment, and usually linseed oil. And you can paint with it in very different ways. For the so-called alla prima painting, which we are also trying out today, the oil is either taken directly from the tube or diluted with just a little linseed oil. The oil then hardens over time through oxidation, and you get a very resistant, water-insoluble surface. You can also paint oil paints in several layers on top of each other. But because oil dries differently from water, as you might know, water evaporates, but oil simply dries, you will need a so-called solvent for the lower layers. And the most commonly used solvent is turpentine oil. But careful, these solvents are all toxic if inhaled, so you have to be sure to ventilate the room well when using them. There are alternatives like citrus turpentine, which don't smell as strong, but they are also toxic. For you as a beginner, if you don't want to spend a lot of money, the cheapest option would be odorless white spirit, which you can then also use to wash your brushes. Okay, very important. If you want to wipe off the paint from your brush or your palette knife, you can either use cloth rags or kitchen towels. But you must store crumpled and dirty kitchen towels in a lockable container until you can dispose of them. This is not only to prevent toxic fumes from collecting in the room, but it also keeps you safe because both linseed oil and turpentine are highly inflammable. Personally, I have a metal bucket with a lid that has proven itself very useful for that. As a palette, you can buy yourself a wooden palette like this one. That's not very expensive, but you can also use simple paper plates that you have sealed with acrylic paint. Or what I do, you can use a glass plate. And for this little palette here, I have sealed a piece of carton with acrylic paint, and I put my paints here. And this is a glass plate, and when you're done painting, you can simply wipe off the remaining paint and wash the glass plate with dish soap and water, and then you have a very clean new surface. And what I do when I'm finished with painting, I put this whole palette in a cake container, and my colors stay fresh for several days. Brushes come in many qualities and shapes. Bristle brushes can hold a lot of paint and are usually used for the first rough application of paint. Soft hair brushes or synthetic brushes are used if you want to blend the paint finely. Palette knives are very practical if you want to mix paint, or rubber spatulas like this one are especially easy for mixing paint because you can wipe the paint off very easily. To start, I would advise you to buy a bristle filbert brush number 6, a synthetic brush number 8, and an angled brush like this one, number 8, a round hair brush number 3, and also a palette knife or a spatula like this one. Traditionally, you would paint with oil paints on canvas or wooden panels. But the problem is that if you use the oil and put it on blank wooden panel or canvas, the oil paint sinks into the surface and can damage it due to the fatty acid content. So what you have to do is you have to apply a barrier layer between the painting surface and the oil paint. And this layer is called gesso or gesso, and was previously made from lime and rabbit glue. Today we have modern acrylic gesso available, and that is absolutely uncomplicated to use. I have black gesso here because I like painting on very dark surfaces, but you can have it in white, of course, as well. I will show you other painting surfaces during the course, but you don't need to buy expensive painting surfaces for your first exercises. Painting plates or oil painting blocks are completely sufficient and also save a lot of space. You can even prepare the painting surface yourself by applying gesso in 2 layers to thick paper like this one, or grey cardboard like this one. And if necessary, you can even use wall paint from the hardware store. But that's just for exercises, not for the paintings you want to keep and maybe want to sell afterwards. Everyone knows oil from the kitchen, so it probably goes without saying that you cannot simply wash out oil paint with water. Water and oil do not mix, so you won't get the fatty oil off your brush if you just use water. This is why you have to use a turpentine substitute or a white spirit or whatever you have. What I have done is I have taken this little glass where I can put a lid on, and I have made holes in another lid, and I made the holes like this, just with a tin opener and a hammer. And now I can wash my brush on this lid, and the paint will sink down to the ground, and the liquid will get clear again after a couple of hours. And this means I can wash my brushes for a long time and avoid toxic waste, because this is absolutely essential. Under no circumstances should solvents be disposed of in the sink. If the liquid is really dirty, you have to put it in a lockable container and take this to the hazardous waste. And if your brush is clean like this, you still have to wash it under water with soap and a detergent so that it doesn't become hard. The last thing that is important is that, if possible at all, you set up your workstation either in a room that you don't have to use after painting, or you create a movable workstation like this one so that you can move your wet pictures and the palette into another room. A large hardboard like this one is a good option. I have covered it with a plastic mat, and you can use the hardboard, of course, later if you want to buy yourself an easel, and you can put the hardboard on the easel and clip your whatever you paint on, you can clip that on the hardboard. And the easel I use, and which I find very useful, I will show you next time. Now I would like to paint a color wheel with you so that you can get to know the oil paints a little better. And to do this, you draw a circle and divide it into 12 parts, like on the clock. It is always wise for beginners in oil painting to start with the lightest color, because dark colors will stain the light colors incredibly quickly. It will take some time until you get a feel for the mixing ratio you need when mixing colors. We just fill the first part with the pure yellow. Then we add a little yellow to the palette and add the tiniest bit of red to create a light orange. If you have added too much red, by the way, don't try to get a brighter orange by adding yellow again. Just wipe off your brush and start again. That's easier. A medium orange goes into the next compartment, and a red orange in the next one, and we simply add a little more red each time. Now you have to wipe the brush very well and possibly wash it out, because we now need a pure red. But from the start, try to wash out the brush as little as possible so that you don't thin your color. Mixtures of red and blue will now go into the next compartments, and normally violet should appear here now. But since cadmium red contains a little yellow, you probably, or very likely, will get something brownish instead of violet. You have to know that with different basic colors, you get different color spaces, and they might not fit for all motifs. But nevertheless, in a painting, they all seem harmonious. When we have all the purples, the brush again needs to be cleaned very well, because now we'll do the same mixtures with blue and yellow. And you can see from this color wheel that the basic colors are very bright, and the mixtures of two basics already are a little bit cloudy in comparison. And as a little exercise for yourself, you can now make different mixtures of the three basic colors and also add white. Let me give you an example. These are two basics and white. And if I mix that into my orange now with the dirty brush, I get this mixture. And if you add white to your blue and your red, you suddenly get a real violet. And you can probably see that these colors that consist of more than two basics are very cloudy. In comparison to all the 12 here, these are a lot more cloudy than these. But the brightest colors are the three basics. And this is why if you want to get a motif to be really bright, you paint the motif itself with the colors from your color wheel with just the basics or mixtures of two basics, and the rest of the painting you paint with all these broken cloudy colors, and then your motif will stand out of the painting. And how this works you will see in the little still life we are going to do together now. So we're going to paint these two pumpkins with the colors we've just used, and we're going to paint them alla prima, which means in one layer and with the colors directly from the tube, which we dilute with only a very small amount of linseed oil. The preliminary drawing is very simple. These two pumpkins are, sphere-like, they are almost spheres. And you just have to make sure that the distance between the object and the edge of the picture is the same up here, and the same here and here. And also you have to be careful that the lines on the pumpkins are straight here, and they bend here a little, even more, and here a little, and even more. That's the only thing you have to be careful of. Now for the light side of the yellow pumpkin, I use yellow with a little bit of red, and where the light hits the pumpkin down here, I add just a little white. And when applying the paint, I follow the lines on the pumpkin. For the shadow side, I add a little blue to my yellow-orange and get a dark yellow version. For the green pumpkin, I mix yellow with a lot of blue so that I get a dark green. And in the shadow side, I simply add more blue and maybe a little red so that it gets even darker. And in the middle, I blend the lighter and the darker colors so that I get a soft transition from light to shadow. I now indicate the dark lines on the yellow pumpkin by mixing a darker color with yellow, red and blue and less white than before, so that I get a very dark yellowish color. And on the green pumpkin, I now have mixed a sort of very light green. It's more white than green. And I carefully draw the lines now on my green pumpkin. Also using the wet color of the green skin. By the way, with beginners it often happens that the color mixes too much and you get muddy colors. If this happens to you, you can, like for example here, simply scratch off the color with a palette knife or a spatula, and then you can start again. So next I fill the background with different tones of white and paint the shadows next to the pumpkins. And for my white, I use all the colors I have used so far in the painting, so that I get a very lively, vivid background. It's very typical of impressionistic alla prima painting that the brush stroke remains visible. If you don't like it, you can calm the surface now with a soft brush. And finally, I paint the details on my pumpkins with a round brush and add the white highlights with a clean brush. And this brings us to the end of our first lesson. If you want to take part in the second lesson, it would be good if you practice mixing colors at home. And the first task would therefore be if you can get 100 different hues from your 4 colors. To do this, first mix only 2 basic colors, then add the third one, and then add white to all your mixtures. And I'm sure you will be amazed at how many mixed variations there are. The second task would be to paint 2 more still lifes with spherical objects, like for example apples, oranges or tomatoes. I wish you a lot of fun with your tasks and success, of course, and I hope to see you next time Until then, have a good time. Bye bye.